case at the International Court of Justice. I welcome others from Palestine who are here, notably Saleh Hijazi and Prof. Haider Eid and his family. Thank you all for being here. I must also acknowledge UJ colleagues central to organizing different parts of this event, Prof. Baso Nzenze, Prof. Salim Vali, Dr. Samea Ibrahim, Dr. Safiso Zondo, Dr. Mohammed Meti, Prof. Shahana Rasul, Dr. Naifa Rashid, and Mr. Beki Matandela. Thanks for your teamwork, and I offer a special welcome to Dr. Munir Fakir El-Din, my dean counterpart at the Faculty of Arts, Birzeit University, and Dr. Tina Rafidi, assistant to the dean, who are joining us online. They have been our consistent collaborators. So let me start by saying we are excited to be co-hosting this event, the Shireen Abu Akleh Memorial Lecture, with Birzeit University for the second year. Last year was our inaugural year. We focused on media freedoms and the responsibility of journalists who operate in spaces such as occupied territories and in places where people do not enjoy human rights, as was the case during South Africa's apartheid era. We remember too well detention without trial, disappearances, and mass killings. We reflected in 2023 on Shireen Abu Akleh's excellent reporting and rootedness in the Palestinian cause as she sought to highlight the daily struggles of Palestinians and resistance against the brutality of Israeli occupation. As we strive to keep her memory alive, we continue to stand in solidarity with the call for accountability and the bringing to justice those responsible for her death. Over 100 journalists have now been killed in Gaza since October 7th, 2023. This year, the theme of our lecture is the responsibility of the academy in a time of genocide. The current siege on Gaza is in its 7th month, and the death toll is now close to 35,000. We are currently witnessing a full-blown assault on Rafah. To date, more than 14,000 children have been killed in Gaza. 90% of school structures in Gaza have been destroyed, and the higher education system in Gaza has been decimated through systematic and calculated attacks on universities, academics, and students. So what is our responsibility in the face of genocide, scholasticide, and epistemicide? We look forward to the insights and contributions of our speakers on this topic, and I know Prof. Salim Vali will explore this as well. From the UJ side, I should say that this partnership between our university and Birzeit University came into being in 2019 when a memorandum of understanding was signed between our two universities. The MOU aims to build and drive cooperation in respect of academic activities and internationalization. We expect greater collaboration to initiate projects, staff-student exchanges, and joint research between our two institutions. We also anticipate that sharing ideas about critical matters in the areas of journalism, social justice, political histories, and the task of rebuilding will help to advance the learning and development of our students, Palestinian and South African, who will take their place in time to become exemplary scholars and anti-apartheid agents of change. So with these opening remarks, I welcome you once again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. And I hand over now to Prof. Salim Vali. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dean Camilla Naidu. You've said everything I wanted to say. So that's great because we have a full, exciting program. So I'm not going to waste too much time. Professor Basso will thank people towards the end. But Professor Naidu has asked me just to mention some people that she might have left out. She didn't leave out people, but I just want to single a few people out. I mean, firstly, online, we have members of the Abu Akleh family. And Natalia Dinat, Dr. Dinat came to me and said, please, you have to talk about the International Union of Scientists who have members throughout the world, thousands, and they have been distributing this event. So we expect many of them to be with us. I think that Professor Naidu talked about Dr. Allah, who will be speaking as the Vice President of the university. There's a bit of an error on the program in his own right. Our good friend Zain Dango, the Director General of DIRCO, had to take care of some very, very urgent business, and he's asked the minister to replace him. I'm just teasing. It's also his birthday, Minister. I'm sure you've wished him happy birthday. Okay. He's doing incredible work. We also have Diana Bhutto, that's been mentioned, Samya Botme, but also with us here.
Recording in progress.
Somebody very special to many of us for decades. He spent a long time in prison on 3 occasions. It's Professor Raji Surani, who is at the Palestinian Center for Human Rights in Gaza. He's in exile at the moment in Cairo. And with him as well, sitting next to our very special Palestinian South African Professor Haida Eid, is Hamde Shakura, who's also with the Palestine Center for Human Rights. And we're really glad they've come to join us. Remember, Professor Surani is also part of the South African legal team. And we have one of the youngest participants here. For those online, I'm not sure if you'll get a chance to see all these beautiful people, but we have a packed house. And the youngest person here is Salma Eid, as well as Haifa Eid. And Haifa Eid is going to treat us to a rap song later in the program on video. But I think that we really need to thank once again Minister Naledi Pandor. She has an extremely demanding schedule, especially this time of the year, as you can imagine. So we really, firstly, are immensely proud of her as our minister. And I think all the people I mentioned and more online, too many names to go through, once again deserve a rousing applause one last time. You have the program with you, and I'm not going to go through the entire program. Please have a look at it, but we'll start with a short video that speaks to the issues Camilla mentioned, the scholasticide or the educide, which actually accompanies the genocide we are seeing. And I think most people know it is the systematic, deliberate destruction of the means of education, which didn't start on October the 8th, which has been going on since 1947. The looting of the literature, the destruction of infrastructure of hundreds of schools, over 400 schools, every university in Gaza, libraries, archives, including the Central Archives, printing presses, but of course, together with the mass murder of thousands of students, close to 6,000 students, as well as 100 full professors and 4 presidents of universities. There were 11 universities that were destroyed and 1 additional one that makes it 12 a few days ago, Isra University. It's also the maiming of students, educators, professors, poets, and the killing of poets, of intellectuals. And all of this is done using sophisticated technology, using AI and all those programs. And we at this university are proud of being the epicenter of 4IR, but we also understand that technology can be used for really destructive purposes, as we're seeing now, so that those aspects of technology cannot be ignored. It's not just a technical issue, and it won't necessarily bring us to that goal of a kinder, more humane society. Technology might make matters worse. High-tech technology that Israel used, the surveillance, the testing of the bombs on the bodies of Palestinian men, women, and children is then exported throughout the world. The warlords in Africa, the Central American dictatorships at one point, South American dictatorships, and it's a font of reaction. It has always been for the West, initially to make the region safe for oil companies, and now even training the police that are beating up students that killed African Americans in Ferguson. The same police force is being trained by Israel. So Israel is a threat to the world. When we fight for Palestine, when we support the Palestinian struggle, we don't forget the role Israel played in our own oppression. When all relationships dissolved with most countries around the world, Israel was still a good friend of apartheid South Africa. At all levels, economic, trade, military, building nuclear bombs, etc., as a form of inter-racist solidarity. So I want to end to say that after the video, we will have former Minister Ronnie Kasrils, who remains consistently over the decades a fearless freedom fighter against colonialism, apartheid, racism, and imperialism. And I have to say that he is one of our most valuable, energetic Palestinian solidarity activists, both in South Africa and, without exaggerating, in the world. So we also welcome Ronnie, Comrade Ronnie. So I'm going to ask Kevin and Brad now to show the video, the first video on scholasticide. Thank you.
Now, Birzeit University is gone. Dust and debris have lost hope for a generation of Palestinians. This is what the campus used to look like. A modern university offering courses including finance, engineering and law for more than 4,000 students.
نسمع الآن صوت اشتباكات وإطلاق النيران في هذه المناطق. هذا هو الحال الآن في شمال غزة. عدد كبير من المواطنين.
تقتلنا في الشارع. انت قلت لنا اطلع مع مرأة من تو لسه عمالك قلت. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. اللي بيعدم الناس قدام اهله. عدموه قدام اهله يا راجل برضه اولاده. قدام ابوه وامه بيقول بكفي راح عدموه.
Gaza Strip used to be Abed al-Kara and Mohammed al-Fajem's school. The 10-year-old friends from Eastern Han Yunis, traumatized from 6 months of war, stare at its destroyed shell. Once a place of learning, the school is now riddled with bullets. Papers are scattered across gutted classrooms. Posters peel off the walls. Damaged books line the floors. It's a grim reminder of their studies and time spent with friends. For fifth grader Al-Kara, those days feel like a distant memory.
What is this destruction? Destruction. We used to study in these schools, and we used to play in the playground. They would bring us toys. We would go out during recess. We would go to the classroom and walk around. The principal would come to the classrooms. He would give us the books. We would go there and see who is coming and going. We would stand at the school gate.
Much of Gaza looks just like this, reduced to rubble and wasteland. That includes many schools, which, with children making up about half of Gaza's 2.3 million population, have a critical place in society. Palestinians across the densely packed enclave face severe shortages of water, food, medicine and healthcare. Many young students who were hungry to learn are now simply hungry. They wonder if they'll ever be able to pack their books and go back to school again. Sat on the school's rubble, teacher Mohammed Al-Qudari reflects on the wide-scale ruin of Gaza's education system.
There is destruction of educational institutions and spaces, resulting in the destruction of educational life. There is destruction of universities. Almost all the Gaza Strip's universities have been destroyed. Almost all schools have been destroyed, along with kindergartens. There is complete destruction of the Gaza Strip and the education sector.
You don't know whether this is it. We don't deserve this. I'm an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if the target has charged us, open door to door, to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers, even if that is the last thing that I would be able to do. And this is the feeling of everybody. We are helpless. We have nothing to lose.
If I must die, if I must die, if I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth not even to his flesh, not even to himself. Sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, if I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale.
Thank you. I would like to ask everyone here to please stand to observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Comrade Ronnie.
Sanibonani, salams. Good day, everybody. Speaking, Professor Salim Valley, after your presentation and after that of the deans of this very honorable Center of Learning, is an honor. It is extremely moving as we take in the images you've put together. We've seen them on the screens every night and day these last 7 months. What strikes me, Comrade Salim, is if in May, 76 years ago, there had been such awareness, such communication, such responsibility taken by the world, besotted with an illegal, illegitimate coming to being of a Zionist colonial settler state, then much of the suffering then, and that eventuated, could have been stopped in its tracks. There were even so-called progressive states that voted in the United Nations for the legality of Israel. And we've come from the time of Balfour to the time of Biden. Anti-Semitic Balfour, Christian Zionist genocide Joe. And here, when part of this world, and it's not people, it's governments, and it's former colonial powers, and it's the US empire that allows butchery, and yes, dear Minister Naledi Pandor, the genocide you are trying to stop. We also brighten up because we know through our own experience that things get very much worse, especially for the colonial settler regimes from Algeria to Kenya to Rhodesia to Namibia. To our country, things get worse. It's the darkness before the rising of the light. Comrade Naledi, they ought to know here your beautiful name, light in Setswana, and the star in Sesotho, and you have emerged as such a champion of what every human being should be, but especially Dean and your marvelous staff and Salem and everybody, what a university and a place of learning should be, teaching the truth, shedding light, teaching how to look at facts, to uncover lies, to analyze, and bring to the students and the public the truth in every discipline. So I want to congratulate you, Jay. Given its past, somewhat in the shadows of an esteemed university to the right, which I flunked out of it at law school back in 1958. I wasn't a disciplined student like you, Comrade Naledi. I was running after the music and the poetry and so on. Got me into a lot of trouble and into politics at least. But when we see what university students and academic staff can do, and what we see what this star, the University of Johannesburg is doing, we look around in shame as South Africans at some of our institutions, and including the University of Stellenbosch, which at its Senate refused to allow a resolution which simply called for the ceasefire of the carnage we see on our screens. Simple ceasefire, never mind what we should be standing for and what you stand for in your government and our president. And we've seen how he's given you his support, Comrade Naledi. And it's not because there's an election on our doorstep, as some people are saying. It's part of the DNA that makes our Minister Naledi and this ruling government, who has stood by as a ruling party, the ANC, the Palestinians from the word go. It's a day of joy here as well. I'm so pleased to be here to introduce you, Comrade Naledi, because you've brought with you your husband, my comrade in arms, Comrade Sharif. We're saluting each other as soldiers. And I must say, I can't get over how young he looks, because I'm not much older than him. Everything that you've presented to us, the scholar side, what has been done to the education system and to the scholars and the professors, including the surgeons and the doctors and the poets, is so shocking. And it's absolutely correct that in relation to this illegitimate settler colonial state, this Zionist state, that what it's all about is, as we saw from 47, from 48, and the premeditation of the crimes that started then. It's been unfurled by scholars. They didn't pay attention to the Palestinian voice and the scholars of that day. We in the West knew nothing, but then there were people, Jews, like Avi Schleim and Ilan Pape, who were looking into the documentation when it became available after the 30-year law. And they were able to bring to the Western ears, who regarded, well, the Arabs, like the black people of our country, as Untermenschen, and I say that in the German, which was used for the Jews. So they broke that silence, they helped it. But what they've done is helped to introduce the world to the Palestinian voice. As we, South Africans, the black voices, were introduced to the world, who then found that the truth was not coming from colonial settlers, the Balfours and the Bidens, the colonialist voice and the imperialists and their media, which brings us, as I come to introduce the minister, to the day relating to this outstanding journalist and truth seeker, Shireen. And this is the second year of the commemoration. And our hearts go out to her family, who Comrade Salim has mentioned, is sitting in, is listening in. And we say to them, you gave birth to a child, to a warrior of the Palestinian people, but of humanity, and she will never, ever be forgotten. And the example, comrades and friends, that Shireen laid down was that no human being, and more especially those who are meant to convey the facts, seek them out, that these are the gems of humanity. And she so inspired her people that there are, and we see it, Salim, in our dear little Haifa and Salma, these are the new generation of Palestinian people of humanity. And we'll hear from Haifa, as you've promised. But what is it in terms of the targeted killing, as they did in Jenin, the streets of Jenin, where they murdered Shireen, to wipe out the messenger, the conveyor, the spokesperson, to conceal the truth, because that's what these reactionary regimes are about. The killings, they must be taking place like all crimes in the dark. The theft of the Palestinian land, the murders, the massacres, the ethnic cleansing and the genocide, to hide the truth. And everything about today and about a university and about teaching is about seeking the truth and bringing it to the people, like Shireen was doing, and why she was a champion beloved by the Palestinian people. And that's what they murdered. They've murdered that in the past. Look at the history. It's actually quite shocking. When there were Jewish teachers in Palestine in the 30s who were not Zionists, the Zionists went out of their way to assassinate them. This is the facts which have been concealed. And Albert Einstein spoke about this when in New York with Hannah Arendt in 1948, he warned the world that Menachem Begin, who gave birth to the likes of Sharon and Netanyahu, that this was a fascist, he said, and he warned everybody. The Zionists strive to conceal that. So this banning now of Al Jazeera, for whom Shireen worked, clearly is connected with this next phase of the genocide, which Comrade Naledi and the team have brought to the International Court of Justice. And it's part of that total, that denial, the lies of concealing crimes and providing the disinformation, the misinformation, which the mainstream media and the governments of the West support. And this is where we come in and where the universities come in and what we're expecting of the universities of South Africa. And of course, shamelessly, the silence from the collective institutional leadership of this country when it comes to academia. And that, of course, is the South African Universities Forum and the Forum of Science, and they are absolutely quiet, and this is why Stellenbosch and possibly Wits and others will get away with silence. What did the likes of Reverend Martin Luther King, Bishop Tutu, Archbishop Madiba have to say about silence as complicity with the killings, with the evil? And that's where our universities need to wake up those who do not follow in the footsteps of this great university. So coming to my privilege and honor of introducing Minister Naledi, the light and the star of Africa, Naledi Pandor, to come to give us the benefit of her wisdom. And if I might say, Comrade Naledi, and I want to assure you, I know this young lady and her sister, the elder sister who is an ambassador today. I'm constantly in touch. And I knew them, their great father, scholar and revolutionary, and the grandfather, Z.K. Matthews. It's not to leave out the women who were scholars of great wisdom in their own right. And what I was saying is that this young 10, 12-year-old, I used to go to the house, the apartment just on the Thames near Battersea Bridge, to see Big Brother Joe and get the messages and the discussion. And there were these kids already at school. And I want to say, Naledi, if I paid you a little attention and asked what you were doing at school, this was no teacher's pet. She didn't care for praise. It wasn't part of her DNA. So it's not in praising you that I'm overdoing things, but the minister, as you all would well know, is no stranger to academia. She's been a teacher her whole life. She taught at the University of Botswana. She had master's degrees in education, and there was one other, sorry, linguistics, thank you. And of course, she's a doctor now. She's been a minister before foreign ministry, international relations and cooperation, as Minister of Education, taking over from Kada Osman, and then became Minister of Home Affairs. We were ministers together. Home Science and Technology, very high level. She had the temerity to haul Israel before the International Court of Justice, the RJC. Before that, you already had gone to the International Criminal Court, because the courts deal on the one hand with individual leaders and people responsible for crimes of killing. And as we know, the ICJ deals with the question state to state under the United Nations of the crime of genocide. My God, to take the Holy of Holies of Zion, so-called, the figment, playing around with the Bible, the people of the Holocaust and how it's being weaponized and misrepresented, to go to that court and lay down the crime of genocide. opened the whole thing up and the whole truth up. And the situation has changed totally, just as 7th of October has changed, and changed in the sense that the control of the narrative by Zionist Israel and its dreadful supporters around the world, but in those states, from the USA to Europe, is now open. It's changed. And what we have here today is part of the change of the narrative. So, Comrade Naledi, you've done so much. I know personally what it took for you alone at the African Union, which was moving towards allowing Israel observer status at the AU. And this young woman fearlessly stood up against it in those halls of the African Union, with only 2 countries supporting: Algeria, my dear friend over there, the professor from this institution, and Namibia, the country which faced genocide from Germany, as we know. And I spoke to you, Comrade Naledi, and you were saying to me, Comrade Ronnie, I'm appalled. This is the AU, and I'm alone. You never gave up, and you fought it, and you reversed that decision. You've crisscrossed this country since going to that international court, and you have explained to our people, you've explained what this issue is all about, and they understand, because people understand the truth when they hear it. So we owe you so much. This country owes you more than we can say. It gives me great, great pleasure to ask you to come and address us. Thank you very much. Siyabonga, everybody. And if I might say, I'm not very religious, but I'll say it. God bless the truth seekers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gosh, I've never been as embarrassed as I've become since December 2023. And I don't feel I deserve this because it's a team effort. It's the government of South Africa that took the decision, and the Minister of Justice played a very important role. And if President Ramaphosa didn't support it, it wouldn't have seen light of day. So it's the government of South Africa, and I think that's important. So then, allow me to begin. Before I begin the lecture, I just want to make it clear, as I've tried to do in many settings, that South Africa's relationship with the Palestinian cause and the people of Palestine did not begin on the 8th of October. It's a long established relationship because the people of Palestine were fully part of the international solidarity campaign against apartheid. Some of you who are young may not know that a strong element of the 5 key attributes that form the core of the liberation struggle, that one of those important elements was international solidarity. Our leaders, such as O.R. Tambo and many others, went all over the world educating about apartheid, educating about racism and discrimination, educating about colonialism of a special type, and saying to the world, you have a moral obligation to support us in our struggle for freedom. We wish you to become part of a global movement against apartheid. And that movement would become the International Anti-Apartheid Movement. And comrades and friends in Palestine that were spoken to at the time, even though they were suffering huge oppression themselves, they said, South Africa, we understand, we will join you in the struggle. Whatever way we can support you, we will. So it's a long established relationship. It doesn't begin on 8th October, nor has it got anything to do with the elections, although I'll be voting ANC, but anyway, it doesn't have anything to do with the elections. It's a long established relationship that we have, and we have it with many in the world. I've just been in Copenhagen in Denmark, and I had a round table with all the activists who were in the international anti-apartheid movement. I met an 82-year-old who had occupied the consulate of South Africa in Copenhagen in those days in the 1970s. And they stayed there and prevented consular services from being rendered by the apartheid state, and made all those officials extremely uncomfortable by occupying that building. And there are legions of such stories. I met artists against apartheid who painted all buildings associated with the apartheid state and marked them as racist for all the world to see. So it's vital that we as South Africans have a full appreciation, both of our imprint in terms of developing critical concepts for political activism, but also an appreciation of how the world stood with us. People ask me sometimes, how come South Africa is doing more than other Arab countries? And my answer is, I don't know. Because my experience is once the OAU decided to help us in our fight against apartheid, almost all African countries joined and acted in accordance with the decision of the Organization of African Unity. There were a few, irrelevant little ones who didn't quite follow, but the majority were part of the movement against apartheid. So with us, Africans were solid. And we hope that the Palestinian people will enjoy a similar solidarity. So now let me get to my lecture. Allow me to begin by recognizing the coordinator of this important program of the memorial lecture, Professor Salim Bali. He's a really radical person, a revolutionary. And I must say, I feel the fact that he invited me, maybe he thinks I've got a bit of revolutionary in myself too. Professor Bali. And then Professor Camilla Naidu, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities. And my great comrade and mentor, former Minister Ronnie Kasrils. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And yes, it's true, I was going to recognize our Director General, whose birthday it is today. Unfortunately, there's a very important meeting I was supposed to attend, and my only substitute can be the Director General. So I would have asked him to come and present this lecture, but I wanted to be here, so he had to go to that meeting for me. Then I wish to recognize Professor Samia Botme, the Dean of Economics of Birzeit University, and all colleagues from Birzeit University who join us today. I wish to recognize Advocate Diana Butu, our distinguished comrades from Gaza who are with us today, and all our comrades from Palestine who join us, and those from all over the international community who have taken an interest in this important subject. And of course, you, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and I suppose my husband, Sharif. So nice to be with you for once. It's a real honor for me to address you today at this, the second Shireen Abu Akleh Memorial Lecture. To my mind, this lecture occurs against a troubling backdrop of evident decline in media freedom, with suggestions of complicity by practitioners that were previously ardent fighters for free media and expression. Just imagine if South Africa were to ban the SABC. The whole media world would be on us. But what are they saying today about what Israel has done to Al Jazeera? It is vital, I believe, that academics and academic institutions devote more time to this decline in freedom of expression and to the growing threat to it. The decline began well before the advent of embedded journalists, but it has lately snowballed, and we need to be very worried about this development. In the past, journalists broadly knew they would enjoy robust and active protection from fearless colleagues and the public who would risk their lives to protect them. I believe the decline we are witnessing today cannot simply be explained away by citing the existence of wireless technology, social media, or other technologies. There's a bigger threat underway, and we need to pay more attention to it. This week, the world marks 2 years since the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh, the beloved veteran journalist who dedicated her life to the pursuit of justice and truth. To date, no one has been held accountable for her death, despite the initial global outrage, and there has been no reported progress in the investigation at the International Criminal Court, and silence with regards to any other investigations. The UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory concluded on reasonable grounds that Israeli forces used lethal force without justification under international human rights law when they shot and killed Shireen in the occupied West Bank, and thus violating her right to life. The situation for journalists in the occupied Palestinian territories has become increasingly grave over the past 7 months. They are marooned and abandoned by their colleagues, even as the world annually celebrates World Press Freedom Day. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, as of April 23rd this year, at least 97 journalists and media workers have been killed in Gaza since 7th October. The targeting of journalists in the occupied territories is part of a pattern of silencing the free press and is an outright contravention of international law. International human rights law obligates an occupying power to allow for freedom of expression and protests. The ability of journalists to cover events as they take place is essential, and efforts to intimidate and assassinate members of the media should not be allowed to continue with impunity. I wonder of us gathered here, how many know the names of the 97 who have been murdered? If Shireen were alive today, she would have been in the trenches in Gaza, reporting day and night on the atrocities taking place, in the hope that the world would take notice and show their solidarity with the Palestinian people. She would have been devastated by the wholesale destruction of civilian life in Gaza and the unfathomable global intolerance of the unending suffering of the Palestinian people, many of whom have died agonizing deaths trapped under the rubble. She would have been reporting on the immense suffering of survivors in Gaza who are now battling unprecedented hunger and starvation, as well as continuous military assaults by the occupying forces. Regrettably, despite the ruling by the highest court of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, the Israeli state has continued its murderous assault on the people of Gaza with impunity, killing more civilians, maiming thousands of others, continuing the bombing of homes and other buildings and infrastructure, affecting every possible avenue of life of the residents of Gaza. This includes hospitals, ambulances, hundreds of schools, all universities in Gaza, cultural and religious institutions, and much more. The vast majority of the dead and injured are women and children. According to the report by the UN Human Rights Office on 18 April this year, United Nations experts have expressed grave concern over the pattern of attacks on schools, on universities, teachers, and students in the Gaza Strip, raising serious alarm over the systemic destruction of the Palestinian education system. The report states that with more than 80% of schools in Gaza damaged or destroyed, it may be reasonable to ask if there's an intentional effort to comprehensively destroy the Palestinian education system, an action known as scholasticide. The term refers to the systemic obliteration of education through the arrest, detention, or killing of teachers, students, and staff, and the destruction of educational infrastructure, as earlier speakers indicated today. After 6 months of military assault, more than 5,479 students, 261 teachers, 95 university professors have been killed in Gaza, and over 7,819 students and 756 teachers have been injured, with numbers growing every day. At least 60% of educational facilities, including 13 public libraries, have been damaged or destroyed, and at least 625,000 primary and secondary school students and over 100,000 college and university students in Gaza have no access to education. The IDF has damaged or destroyed 9 out of every 10 schools, at least 65 of which were UNRWA-run facilities, sheltering thousands of displaced civilians. Between October 2023 and January this year, the IDF bombed all the universities in Gaza. Consequently, Gaza's treasured intellectual landmarks, including the Islamic University of Gaza, the North Gaza and Tubas branches of Al-Quds University, and Palestine Technical University have all been destroyed. Another 195 heritage sites, 227 mosques, and 3 churches have also been damaged or destroyed. including the Central Archives of Gaza, containing 150 years of history, all gone. Israel University, the last remaining university, was demolished by the military of Israel on January 17 this year. This obliteration of schools, universities, and libraries furthers the settler colonial project of Eurasia, because these are spaces that nurtured the creation and transmission of knowledge. The destruction of schools, universities, libraries, and research facilities has deprived Palestinians of the histories and knowledge housed in these institutions. Attacks on education are often a key indicator of state intolerance of views that do not reflect state thinking. This should not be tolerated by all of us. The international academic community should have sent a clear message that those who target schools and universities in other states will be held responsible, and that accountability for these violations will include an end to collaboration, an end to donations, an end to financial support. Universities are the bedrock of knowledge and truth, and they require freedom to do their essential work of knowledge generation and innovation. World universities must keep a watching brief on the reconstruction of Palestine and insist that the program includes the reconstruction of all education facilities at all levels. And of course, you know that wherever I speak on this question, my expectation is after our talk, you will become activists. I do not talk to passive audiences. Today, as educators, advocates, activists, civil society, and state structures, we should all play a role in the global struggle in search of truth and justice. It is our collective responsibility to raise our voices in solidarity with the people of Palestine, who are fighting for their survival in the midst of the genocidal campaign being waged against them. You may think it doesn't affect you, but one day someone will turn against your universities, and that day you will wish you had stood up and acted. Don't let that happen. University students in other regions of the world need to feel the support of universities worldwide in a unified rejection of injustice, harm, and murder. Our own institutions of higher learning have a special responsibility, due to the history I referred to earlier, to lead by example and to provide moral and political leadership, given that they claim to play a key role in advancing critical citizenship. How can it be when you say you advance critical citizenship that you are in institutions that are complicit and silent? How is that possible? This has been done by our institutions in the battle against apartheid, and you have to do it again. I remember, days are very nice of protest now. I remember being a lecturer at the University of Cape Town, and they brought Caspers onto our campus. And our students, mainly students of SASCO, I must say, they lay down in front of the Caspers, and those Caspers could not move. They didn't allow them because they said, we are lying down, and if you're going to proceed, you go over our bodies and you will kill us. They stopped right next to the students. I remember I was right there. But the students were not afraid. They didn't stand up. They stood their ground. They lay there. They stood for humanity. This is all we're asking you to do. In November last year, more than 1,000 individuals connected to higher education in South Africa, including researchers, lecturers, administrators, and students at public universities and other institutions, signed an open letter on solidarity with Palestine. They condemned Israel's onslaught on the people of Gaza and the targeting of schools, universities, hospitals, and emergency support infrastructure. And they called on University South Africa and the Academy of Science of South Africa and their members to do the same. The University of Cape Town and the University of the Western Cape have made official statements calling for a ceasefire and immediate humanitarian aid to Gaza. The UCT Senate has resolved that no UCT academic should collaborate with any academic on any research project if they are identified with the Israeli Defense Force. The majority in the Senate voted in favor of supporting Palestinian academics and the right to have free debates on Zionism without being accused of anti-Semitism. Stellenbosch University Senate members have called for an end to the brutal and barbaric destruction of Gaza, saying that no crimes can justify genocidal actions in retaliation. Unfortunately, the Senate did not pass a resolution on the Israel-Palestine crisis, on the genocide and destruction of scholarship and education in Gaza, as the majority of Senate members did not agree with this resolution. One of the strongest statements has come from the University of Fort Hare, where I will be speaking tomorrow. The university from where many of our struggle stalwarts emanated. The University of Fort Hare has called for an immediate ceasefire that must be enforced by the United Nations, and the smooth passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza equitably distributed throughout the whole territory of the Gaza Strip. The university has expressed its support for our government's call for the International Criminal Court to investigate international war crimes committed by Israel. Of course, you'd have seen in reports today that the prosecutor of the ICC has received, like me, a letter from congressmen who have indicated that if you dare to issue a warrant, we will deal with you. Same letter I have received. Fort Hare has also committed not to pursue any institutional links with Israeli institutions, as these have played a key role in supporting settler colonial oppression and apartheid, and have been complicit in grave violations of human rights, including developing weaponry, military doctrines, and legal justification for the indiscriminate mass targeting of Palestinians. The University of Fort Hare has committed itself to helping end the 17-year siege on Gaza and called for the immediate release of Palestinian academic staff and students who are being held in terms of Israeli apartheid legislation and in violation of international law. We applaud Fort Hare for the strong stand it has taken, and our other universities that continue to express solidarity with Palestinian universities, scholars, and students. But we need Forte to be joined by more powerful forces. And can you imagine if this institution, one of the largest in our country, one of the most significant, one of the wealthiest, one of the most academically productive, can you imagine if it joined Forte, what the impact of such a unity in activism would be? Recently, the renowned Palestinian feminist scholar, Nadira Shaub-Kebokian, was suspended from the Hebrew University for her outspoken stance against genocide. Professor Shaub-Kebokian had previously been unjustly suspended by Hebrew University following a month-long smear campaign by the university because she urged for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and described Israel's military assault against Palestinians in Gaza as genocide. While she's now been reinstated, Israel has made it a crime to express any empathy and support for Palestinians. And you also know that due to a range of very successful protests in the United Kingdom, the government there decided to add a new twist to the definition of terrorism, which meant essentially democratic, peaceful protests now become a terrorist act. So we now have a situation where being anti the notion of genocide is acceptable public opinion in Israel. And that is what you must express. You must deny the truth, because by denying the truth, you are doing what the Israeli government wants you to do. The mobilization in support of Professor Shaub-Kebokian on our South African campuses is really commendable, and we thank South African universities for their support to her. We are also encouraged by the growing mobilization on college campuses across the world in support of the just cause for freedom and justice of the people of Palestine. Columbia University has been the locus of protest against America's support for the war in Gaza. Columbia University has a long history of protest on social justice issues in past decades, from the war in Vietnam to protests in support of the civil rights movement and the university campus movement against apartheid in South Africa in the 1980s. Columbia was the first American university to divest from apartheid South Africa. The student encampment at Columbia University, which began on April 17th, has inspired students worldwide. Students had camped out in tents in protest over the war in Gaza and called for the university to divest itself from anything related to Israel. A massive crowd of faculty recently walked out in solidarity with students and with the movement for Palestine at Columbia University. Princeton University faculty and staff have also affirmed their solidarity with and support for the Columbia University and Barnard College students who are continuing their demand that the university divest from Israel's genocide in Gaza and ongoing occupation of the West Bank, of East Jerusalem, and other Palestinian land. Princeton has also called on Columbia University to reverse the suspension of the student groups in the university, the Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine and Columbia Jewish Voices for Peace. Yale University, where my grandfather graduated, has become another flashpoint in the conflict between pro-Palestinian demonstrators and university administrators. Demonstrators were camped at the University Plaza, protesting Yale's refusal to divest from military weapons manufacturers, as they claim, the students, that it makes Yale complicit in Israel's genocide in Gaza. Students at the University of Minnesota were also recently arrested for demanding that their school divest funds from arms companies, including General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, and Honeywell. Students at New York University and MIT are the latest to have joined the pro-Palestinian movement. We are hopeful that this unprecedented activism by students in the United States will also spur greater activism among student movements here in South Africa and throughout the African continent. And if we start in South Africa, everyone will follow. We hope that this would then spur more vocal support from our university administrators, some of whom have remained silent. It is, dear colleagues, utterly unacceptable that Israel continues to disregard the rulings by the International Court of Justice, as well as UN resolutions, and continues its unrelenting bombardment of Gaza with impunity. Israel has simply ignored the ICJ's ruling, which granted South Africa's urgent request of 6 March 2024 for further provisional measures to prevent Israel from causing irreparable harm to the rights invoked by South Africa under the 1948 Genocide Convention in respect of the ongoing siege in Gaza. The court was unambiguous when it agreed with South Africa's assertion that the situation in Gaza had deteriorated significantly since the court's order of 26 January this year, as a result of Israel's failure and their failure in responsibility to comply with the court's rulings. The lack of accountability by Israel is increasingly clear. Those of you who are old enough to remember apartheid will recall that towards the end, as it was about to crumble, it became fierce in oppression. The seeds of the fall are here, and it needs us to be active in supporting it to ensure that those seeds flower. So don't rest. We concur as South Africa with the assertion of the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to health, Ms. Tlaleng Mofokeng, when she very correctly stated that Israel's war in Gaza has from the start been a war on the right to health and has obliterated the Palestinian territory's health system. We further agree with the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories, Ms. Francesca Albanese, when she recently highlighted that the continuation of Israel's impunity and exceptionalism is no longer viable, especially in light of the binding UN Security Council resolution 2728, which called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. In this respect, we call on the international community to act to bring the perpetrators to justice and ensure accountability for the victims and their families. Unfortunately, due to my experiences of the letters and other actions, I can't tell you how to act because that is often used against me. But I can tell you to be activists. I won't tell you what to do, but be activists. The evidence that we have of the mass killings of civilians points to the perpetration of war crimes, crimes against humanity, which include murder and extermination, and genocide, as defined in Articles 6, 7, and 8 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. as well as violations of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, specifically the Fourth Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in a time of war, as well as customary international humanitarian law. International humanitarian law prohibits attacks on civilians and non-combatants, underlying the need to protect human life during times of war. I hope in this university, your lecturers encourage you to refer to international humanitarian law and international human rights law, and not to use phrases that are coined by unilateral actors of global rules-based system. The rules are international human rights law, international humanitarian law. There are no other rules. It's not football here. We're a world community, and we have conventions and protocols that we ratify in our parliaments, and it is those that set the rules. There's no other global rule-based world order. It's not. Conventions and protocols signed by us, laws we frame. So don't be bamboozled, because when someone is saying rules-based, they mean do what I want. They don't mean the laws we've all signed on to. So don't be fooled. And if your lecturers use that rules-based thing, just challenge them. It is clear from international law that states have to ensure that non-combatants are protected, even in times of war. As South Africa, we were really appalled and disgusted by the recent grim discovery of a mass grave containing the remains of over 200 Palestinian civilians at Nasser Hospital in Gaza. This followed the reported discovery of mass graves at Al-Shifa Hospital. These grim findings necessitate immediate and comprehensive investigations to ensure justice and accountability. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over the situation in Palestine, and we have previously called on the Office of the Prosecutor to urgently lead a thorough and impartial investigation into this matter, one that complies with international legal standards to establish the facts and bring those responsible to justice. It is the collective duty of the international community to ensure that atrocities of this nature are duly prosecuted in terms of the Rome Statute and the Geneva Conventions. If all of this were happening in Africa, they would have already issued warrants. It took 3 weeks to issue warrants on Putin, 7 months, nothing on Prime Minister Netanyahu and his ministers. We are equally concerned as South Africa with Israel's use of starvation as a weapon of war. Israeli human rights group B'Tselem has recently issued a new report, Manufacturing Famine, which concludes that Israel has been committing the crime of starvation under international law in the Gaza Strip. According to the report, the severe hunger that has developed over recent months in the Gaza Strip is the product of a deliberate and conscious Israeli policy. It has been openly declared by decision makers, including a member of the Israeli War Cabinet, from the very beginning of the war, not in the middle, not later, right at the start. For months, Israel has pursued a policy of total blockade, complete destruction of the possibility of local food production through farming or fishing, and restrictions on the delivery of aid. The result of this policy is millions of starving people. Now imagine the NSFAS recipients. If you were denied access to your allowance, totally denied, no food whatsoever. This is what's happening to the people of Palestine, and we are silent. we should all be going on hunger strike until they have food, even if it's once a week, something to show our solidarity. During Israel's blockade, Israel's years of blockade on Gaza, it has studied how much food Gaza's residents need to survive. Israel has drafted mathematical formulae and put together caloric tables for this purpose. As B'Tselem points out in its report, this means Israel entered the war with a vast amount of knowledge about the needs of Gaza's population and made a conscious choice to deny them, pushing hundreds of thousands of people into hunger and using starvation as a method of warfare. This is full dehumanization and nothing else. The dehumanization of Palestinians in Israeli eyes has accelerated in recent months. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, in March this year, 2.2 million people, almost 100% of the population in Gaza, were experiencing phase 3 level food insecurity or worse. 1.17 million were at phase 4, and nearly 500,000 people were experiencing the highest level of food insecurity, phase 5. In early April, Samantha Power, who heads the United States Agency for International Development, assessed that famine was already occurring in northern Gaza. The assessment was given during a hearing of the US House Foreign Affairs Committee. This was the first time a US official declared that famine was already present in Gaza after months of warnings that the hunger crisis was escalating. For many months, Israel has prevented the required scope of humanitarian relief, including food and medicines, from entering the Gaza Strip, and particularly northern Gaza. The destruction that Israel sowed during the fighting has obliterated the ability to grow food, as I said earlier, and caused an almost entire reliance on outside aid, which aid is controlled by Israel. Israel is failing to meet its obligations in this regard by not allowing sufficient aid to enter the Strip, and by failing to guarantee the safe arrival of the aid to its destination, even in areas it says are under its control. A concrete criminal prohibition on starvation is set out in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Starvation of civilians is defined as a war crime under the ICC's jurisdiction, and they have to investigate and prosecute. Imagine 1 million signatures to the ICC saying we are waiting for you to prosecute. The Rome Statute definition of starvation is intentionally using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare by depriving them of objects indispensable to their survival, including willfully impeding relief supplies. So, in conclusion, in memory of Shireen Abu Akleh, we all continue to call on the ICC to prosecute these war crimes and to issue arrest warrants for those leaders in Israel who have ordered and presided over these crimes. The slowness to investigate and prosecute those responsible for these war crimes necessitates greater mobilization among the youth and civil society around the globe to ensure that justice for Palestinians is realized. As I have said, it is time for collective action by you and for us to champion the call for implementation of UN resolutions and rulings of the world's highest court. Your voice on this in social media, in protest, in petitions would be immeasurably important. We owe this responsiveness to the people of Palestine and to the memory of our dear departed Shireen Abu Akleh. I thank you for having allowed me this opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Pandor. The Minister will have to leave us before the program ends, but we thank her from the bottom of our heart for those words. I need to say that many people came to this event, so we've had to open the floor below us, and there are scores of people. So if you're watching me, thank you very much. And we've hooked them up to videos as well. There's also an immense number of people online. And your discussion, your presentations has already started actually debates throughout the country. So a group of professors in Stellenbosch, 86 professors, have signed a petition condemning the resolution, talking about their dismay and putting together a counter resolution. And I think they echo the words of the students, not only in the US, but now throughout the world, that they will not stop, they will not rest. They know that they have truth on their side. So this is what's happening on a number of our campuses. I'm going to call Dr. Akleh Azar, who has been a wonderful friend of this university. I need to say, Dr. Akleh, that in 2010, 2011, this university severed links with Ben Gurion University. I'm not going to go into the details, but it was around a water project. At the same time, Amnesty International issued a report titled Thirsting for Justice, a comprehensive report that showed how water was stolen from the Palestinians. And of course, Saleh worked for Amnesty International later on, but that report is still a brilliant report. Since then, part of our mobilization during that struggle against Ben Gurion made us sign a memorandum with Birzeit University, where we would establish a Center for Palestinian Studies on this campus. And they would establish a Center for African Studies. Because of finances, etc., that hasn't happened. But it's something we don't want to stop, and our Dean, Naidu, is very passionate about these links with Birzeit University, and Allah has been facilitating this. He's recently put together a series of articles. He was a guest co-editor in our academic journal, Education as Change. No, he's shaking his head, but he'll give us more detail about that. Other colleagues at Birzeit were involved, but he's aware of that, and we're trying to deepen relations with Birzeit University. So over to you, Dr. Akleh. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the University of Johannesburg and to South Africa. I'm very honored to be here. I would like to thank Professor Camilla and all faculty members who facilitated this event and made it possible. And also I would like to thank Dr. Naledi and Mr. Ronnie for the very inspiring words. It's in a moment where the world was speaking about the end of the decolonization moment. There's like, it's a moment beyond the history or the end of history, where basically imperial powers, colonial system are established with a new form of colonialism. Your words and your action as a country is actually giving us a new hope, or at least resonate with our understanding that new humanity is possible. And decolonization is not an era that ended, but it's actually a continuous struggle for social justice and achieving justice globally, and putting perpetrators in, held them accountable. So thank you so much for your inspiring words. So our collaboration as Birzeit University with the University of Johannesburg, it does not come as just an accident, but actually it is but I think it's part of a larger vision we have as Palestinian University to deepen our connections to global South universities that basically share with us a common understanding of the role of academia as a responsible action, a moral obligation toward a better world. So to start with understanding what's going on in Gaza in relationship to higher education institutions. And the second point I'm going to raise is what Birzeit University is trying to do to support our colleagues in Gaza. As you all know, we have, Birzeit University is located in the West Bank, and there is a colonial geography that's basically separate us from being physically there or close to our colleagues in Gaza. But to understand the destruction of higher education, as mentioned before by every speaker, we have to understand that it's not something that's accidental, but it's a part of the logic of settler colonialism in Palestine. So the destruction of academic institutions, it's part of an elimination process, the logic of elimination that works in Palestine. And it's basically destroying the physical and institutional social life of Palestinians, preventing them from having a collective identity, preventing them from even dreaming of having a collective national consciousness and a collective culture. It's a destruction of every meaning of a Palestinian life, transforming Palestinians into a bare life. In other words, people without any political future, any political rights, through the destruction of the modern society institution, particularly higher education institutions. And therefore, the role of academia in this sense is actually standing as antithesis of the very basic practice of destruction or genocide that's taking place. This is what academia should stand for. And it's not a technical knowledge. We don't learn or we don't teach, we don't practice technical knowledge. We're actually an ethical agent of the world, that as academics. So that's the responsibility that we have is huge in the sense that it's important to highlight that we don't only understand the world, we actually act to change it. And this is our responsibility. So Birzeit University tried to conceptualize and suggest an initiative to support higher education sector in Gaza Strip. We named it Rebuilding Hope. And it was important for us to highlight the notion of hope in particular, because we understand that there is a moment that the war gonna end. And we know this war is coming to an end. Nevertheless, we know that there is an effort of reconstruction. There is the effort of reconstruction. And we know that this reconstruction of Gaza gonna be politically conditioned. So our role is actually to raise hope, to challenge such politically conditioned form of reconstruction. It's gonna be part of the dynamic of the global dynamic of power, and they're gonna play it in the same. They're gonna try to rebuild Gaza according to their own, within the structure of power that exists in the world. And we know that the reconstruction project after the end of the war would be used as a warfare by itself, by prolonging the process of actually reconstruction, and would basically push people to, or put more or prolonged form of pain and pressure, and therefore make the process of reconstruction a tool actually to force people outside of Gaza. So it will be a tool in the warfare itself. So our role is actually to give hope that reconstruction process or an intervention, an immediate intervention is possible, and it's needed, and it's actually challenging the very logic of settler colonialism and imperial interventions in Palestinian politics, and should be directed and thought through by Palestinians themselves, not by external forces. And that's very important. And we understand that it's part of a process that we believe as scholars in Birzeit. This initiative was drafted through a long process of reflections and thinking through it with many scholars on campus at Birzeit University. One of the main goals in this war, and probably the history of the settler colonialism project in Palestine, that Palestinians are not allowed to have any form of victory. Even symbolic victory is not allowed. So this is important for us, that we can try to build our own initiative, our own work from the ground, actually as a form of hope, just as a symbolic victory, even if we couldn't achieve much on the ground, but actually as a symbolic act to be victorious. Even if we can't really win a war, but we can win our ability to rebuild and actually to stay exist. So from there, this kind of the understanding of how higher education is being targeted and why, Birzeit University suggested 3 levels of interventions in this Rebuilding Hope initiative. The first level of intervention is the institutional support, which is responsibility for Birzeit University to offer and to act and to connect with international academic community to support Gaza universities as institutions that to be able to rebuild themselves. So the first is the institutional support for Gaza University. And the second level of intervention is actually the education. I'm honored and thankful to my colleagues at Birzeit University. Yesterday, we started our first program of remote education for Gaza students. And the program itself is all voluntary from Birzeit scholars who are going to be teaching around 8,000 students for the first round of education. At least we're trying to do something on the ground. And the third element or the third level of intervention that we feel we are obligated to as academics is basically academic research that would transform society, transform and challenge the destruction of the society in Gaza, environment, infrastructure, what we call the transformative research. And this transformative research and education, institutional support, we feel it's a responsibility because it's a small intervention, it's a small contribution. But we believe that our role, even if it was just speaking and doing academic research, not much in the sense of actually doing on the ground. We believe in the wisdom of Brazilian pedagogist who once said that we have to start renaming the word to be able to change it. So renaming the word, with academia, we start renaming the word to be able to change it. Thank you so much.
We will go straight to Professor Samia Botme, also from the University of Birzeit. You know, the attacks, very severe as we've seen in Gaza, but it doesn't mean that West Bank University students and professors are not being repressed. Many are in prison, some tortured, and there have been terrible attacks as well. So without wasting more time, we ask Samia Cabello if we can just, yeah? Okay, thank you. There we go. Hi, Samia.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'd like to start. I'm here sitting at Birzeit University at the moment, so it's a good actually opportunity to be speaking to you from here, from Palestine. I'd like to start by thanking our South African comrades for their long-standing solidarity, actually. It's been for decades now, and particularly in the solidarity with against the ongoing genocide in the Gaza Strip. We are inspired by this solidarity, and we are grateful for it. We've always said, actually, in Palestine that South Africans are the only people around the world, and I'm not really exaggerating here, that understands us fully. You've been through similar experience of oppression, you've resisted, and you've liberated yourself. And for us, that's inspiring, and that's a role model to follow. So thank you, South Africa. My contribution will be along two lines. Other speakers have spoken eloquently on issues related to the genocide in the Gaza Strip in relation to education in particular, but broadly as well, the destruction of life and livelihoods, as well as the ongoing famine and displacement of people. I will probably shed some light on what's happening to the higher education sector and education in general in the West Bank, and also focus a bit on forms of solidarity beyond the issues that Ala talked about, which are extremely significant and important, but going broader into more political dimensions. For us as Palestinians, education has always been very significant and important. And Israel has always systematically targeted education. For over 76 years, Israel did more than it could to undermine the education sector. Israel, like any other colonialist, education for it makes life difficult. It enables Israel to suppress our narrative, the more ignorant we are. It makes Israel more able to control the population, the colonized population, if we are ignorant. This is why, for us as Palestinians, we've always invested in education heavily. Despite our exile, despite our displacement within Palestine, despite Israel destroying the educational infrastructure, killing students, scholars, and academics, we've always upheld education as an important survival mechanism. Surviving colonialism is done for us through education, resisting colonialism, and we see it as also as a path to liberation. So this formula and balance between Israel trying to suppress education for us gives more meaning to education, more investment in education, and more building of education. I just want to show you a quick map of what's happening to education within the West Bank. I hope that you can see it on your screens. This is actually a map of the West Bank, and we have all sorts of dots and crosses. The crosses actually are the increased number of Israeli checkpoints. Just before October 7th, we have had around 400 checkpoints within the West Bank, and which covers within cities, within governorates, between cities and rural areas. So this very small territory has around 700 checkpoints at the moment. The orange parts are basically the displacement process undertaken by Israel's colonial settlers, but also authorities within the West Bank. So we have an ongoing ethnic cleansing process within the West Bank of entire communities being displaced, of houses being demolished, of people being deprived of their right to exist, basically. At the same time, we have a heightened settler violence. Settlers have been empowered over the past few years to attack Palestinians, and these attacks are usually supported by the Israeli army and other Israeli government arms. Now, this situation of Israeli colonial measures within the West Bank have had a detrimental impact on education, be it school education or higher education. Basically, students, staff, and academics have become unable to reach their educational centers. It has become a life-threatening experience, actually, to try and reach educational centers. As a result, in October, all Palestinian universities within the West Bank switched into electronic teaching. This is, for us, it was a method to try and save students' lives who were routinely harassed at checkpoints, arrested, and detained, and at times also killed. Again, with regards to the West Bank, Israeli settler colonial agencies have been also attacking universities, not just Birzeit University, but Khadouri University, Najah University, Open University, attacking schools and so on. These attacks, these raids, basically have two purposes. The first one is to destroy and vandalize. So the army comes in during the day or night, destroys labs, libraries, confiscates books, confiscates materials, mostly for student unions across universities. But there is also another purpose for these raids, is to arrest students. Very much of the time, campuses are raided to arrest students rather than attacking staff and students at their homes. As you know, at the moment, there are nearly 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons. 145 students from our university are also have been lingering in prison, nearly 70 of them since October. They're all under administrative detention, which means that they have not been charged, and their sentence is renewed every 6 months. So they don't even know when they will be released. I just want to also say a word about Palestinian students and staff, Palestinian citizens of Israel. Since October 7th, Palestinian students in Israeli universities have been harassed. Many of them have been kicked out of the universities, dismissed. And this is because they didn't even go on demonstrations. They just maybe have written a comment saying something about what's happening in the Gaza Strip. And also you've seen with Professor Nadira Koverkian, who has also been sacked from the Hebrew University, reinstated, but with pressure. So I wouldn't even express it as dissent. Any form of protest, any form of voicing concern about what's happening in Gaza is crushed within the West Bank and for Palestinians inside Israel. This reminds us basically of the role of Israeli universities. It is not just the Israeli army that is carrying out atrocities in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. These atrocities are developed and envisioned and planned by Israeli academics based at Israeli universities. And these universities are proud to enlighten us about these developed plans and atrocities. If you look up the websites of Israeli universities, you can see that how proudly they are describing the development of ethnic cleansing projects and schemes, weaponry, and so on and so forth. But also Israeli academic centers and universities are engaged in not just developing these plans and schemes, they are engaged in defending and justifying these schemes. Defending and justifying these schemes means that basically the Israeli educational system is part and parcel of the process of colonialism. It's engaged fully in oppressing the Palestinians, in allowing and justifying and enabling a process of developing these atrocities, but also taking charge of defending these atrocities, not just locally, but internationally. This role for Israeli academia actually enables us to, in a way, look into mechanisms of resistance and solidarity with Palestinian struggle. For us as Palestinians, it's important to engage in the initiatives that my colleague Ala explained, to support these initiatives of enabling a process of education in Gaza. I've actually, just before this session, I was engaged in teaching a session for Gaza students online, of course. It was my first session since we just started yesterday. And it's inspiring how resilient they are, how hopeful they are. We have to support this sentiment. We have to cultivate it and strengthen it. So it's important to work together with Birzeit University and other universities in the West Bank to support our Gaza universities' infrastructure, building of knowledge, and mostly building of hope for the future. Going beyond these highly significant initiatives, it's important to remember that our predicament is not humanitarian, as the world has been trying, especially the northern part of the world, the West, as we call it here in Palestine, has been focusing on our plight as Palestinians as a humanitarian plight. So we should bring aid to the Palestinians. The focus is on how many trucks went into Gaza, how much food came into Gaza, and so on and so forth. Of course, this is important in light of the ongoing genocide, in light of the ongoing famine, the ongoing displacement. But our predicament is political in the sense that the root cause of the Palestinian cause is settler colonialism. And this is why it's important to focus on mechanisms, including divestment from Israeli companies, to work within your universities, your institutions, your civil society organizations, to divest your resources, your pension funds, your provident funds from Israeli companies. All Israeli companies are a target, but also international complicit companies that work with Israel's colonialism and apartheid. Unfortunately, the list is long, and very many institutions around the world are investing in these companies. So it's important to create pressure, to generate pressure on Israel by divesting from these companies, by divesting basically from settler colonialism and apartheid. Also, strengthening academic and cultural boycott is important. Not engaging with Israeli institutions that have been enabling a process of genocide, that have been defending genocide, and not welcoming them at your campuses, but also not engaging in joint research, in joint schemes, and not attending events within Israel is extremely important. So for us here in Palestine, strengthening boycotts, divestment, and hopefully sanctions, as has happened in the South African case, is an important solidarity mechanism and tool for enabling a process of liberation that is collective, that actually rests on principles of anti-racism and anti-sexism and other forms of xenophobia around the world. It is important to stand with and enable student movements that are rising around the world, innovating mechanisms of objecting to what's happening in Palestine. That for us is extremely important. I think for people around the world, it's important to realize that their solidarity actually reaches us in Palestine, be it here in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip. Eventually, people have social media at different points in time. they can see what is happening, and mechanisms through which the American university students at the moment are using to bring pressure on their universities to divest, to implement academic boycotts, are essential in terms of strengthening this solidarity and bringing other countries and regions in the world till this collective pressure actually fruits with just liberation and decolonization in Palestine. I just want to again thank you for your continued solidarity, and we hope one day this predicament of colonialism will end in Palestine as it did end in other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samia. That was really excellent. While you were talking, I'm not sure if you heard, people clapped quite a few times. Thank you once again. And now the last speaker, the equally wonderful advocate, Diana Bhutto. She's the last speaker. I know it's been a long program, but we're coming towards the end. Can I also say that you know the whole thing about the hot mic? When people speak and they don't know they're under microphones. So there's lots of microphones here. So every time you bang a knife on the plate, it amplifies, and people online have been telling me, tell people to stop talking, and it's difficult because the food has arrived, Diana Bhutto. But Diana, we're saving you for the last. Fantastic, you could make it. We know how busy you are, so please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if you can see me. Oh, yes, there we go. I think you can see me now. I wanted to first begin by doing what every speaker has done so far, every Palestinian speaker has done so far, which is to thank South Africa, to thank all of, the people of South Africa, our comrades in South Africa, to thank the minister, to thank the organizers, to thank you, Ronnie, for your endless support, to thank the South African legal team, to thank everybody for all that you have done for Palestine throughout the years. Again, this isn't, just to reiterate what Samia said, this isn't something that is new. It has been longstanding. And I've always said to people that the only two places that I truly feel at home are in Palestine and in Palestine's other half, which is in South Africa. So thank you very much. And thank you also for putting together this very important event. It's hard for me to believe that we're now at the 2-year mark of Shireen's assassination. And the reason that it's still difficult for me to conceptualize that 2 years have passed is because I still find myself tearing up whenever I hear her voice. Whenever I go back to old voice messages or look and see an old report of hers, I still find myself tearing up. And the reason that I find myself tearing up is because Shireen was not just a reporter. She was an excellent one, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But she was a sister to somebody. She was an aunt to 3 people. She was a colleague to many, and she was a beloved friend to me and hundreds of others. And so not having her around has been very difficult for me and for so many others who miss her presence, who miss her laugh, who miss her voice, and who miss her reporting. And it's important for people to understand, and I say this over and over again, Shireen's assassination was not done in a vacuum. It was the result of years of Israel targeting journalists, and in particular, targeting Al Jazeera journalists. They, as I'm sure you know, but it bears repeating, they had in years past, they had bombed the offices of the AP and Al Jazeera in the Gaza Strip. They had in years past killed other journalists as well. They had in the year 2021 broken the arm of Shireen's very dear colleague, Shibar al-Quderi, as she was reporting from Sheikh Jarrah. And since the 7th of October, since this latest phase of Israel's genocide, Israel has killed over 140 Palestinian journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists likes to bring that number down a little bit because they don't recognize journalists who are from Hamas as being journalists, but in fact they are. And so they've done this for a deliberate reason, which is that Israel wants to make sure that you don't see what's happening. Because I firmly believe that once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you see, you are then prompted to act. And so Israel has been trying to block the images and block our seeing, our ability to see, because they don't want people to act. And this is precisely why we've seen that since the 7th of October, that they have not allowed in any foreign correspondents into the Gaza Strip. And instead, our eyes and our ears in Gaza have been the amazing journalists who are on the ground. And I can't hear you, but I really do hope that you're giving applause to these journalists right now, because they've done a phenomenal job, as well as the citizen journalists who have risked their lives and trying to survive a genocide while at the same time trying to shed light and let the world see what is happening to them, what is happening to us. Because again, they believe that once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you see that you should be a person who is pushed to act and that you should be doing things. And this is why so many of these journalists have been risking their lives, and citizen journalists risking their lives just to show us what it is like to live through this phase of Israel's genocide. When I think back to Shireen, and I find myself thinking about her a lot these days, I think about the ways in which the Western media has gotten this genocide wrong. And not only have they gotten it wrong, how they have been complicit in this genocide. And I want to give a couple of examples, and then I want to spend the rest of my time honoring Shireen by talking about the ways in which the stories I know that she would have covered. The two stories that come to mind in terms of Israel's complicity is first being the bombing of Al Ahli Hospital, the Baptist hospital, on the 17th of October. On the 17th of October, when Israel, and I will say that over and over again, when Israel bombed Al Ahli Al-Ma'madani, the Baptist hospital, a lot of Western journalists came out with this reporting that maybe somehow it was Palestinians who had bombed their own hospital. And of course, a lot of Western media went along with it. And the story ended up being, rather than Israel carrying out a genocide that they have been very clear since the first week, since the first days, that they intend to carry out. Instead, the focus somehow shift on whether it was Islamic Jihad or Hamas or whoever who had bombed Al Ahli Hospital. We know very well that it was Israel who bombed that. Why do we know it? Because there were eyewitnesses there. And Shireen, being a good journalist, would have questioned those eyewitnesses and asked them exactly what it is that we saw and that they saw. But instead, journalists allowed the story to develop as though somehow Palestinians are bombing their own hospitals. And here we are now, 30 out of 36 hospitals later that Israel has bombed and put more than 2/3 of them completely out of commission. Another story that I know that Shireen would not have covered incorrectly is the way in which the Western media talked about whether it was okay to raid a Shifa hospital. I remember being in interview after interview after interview with journalists asking me whether it is legal to go in and bomb a Shifa hospital or to invade a Shifa hospital and so on. And I remember the ways in which Western media parroted the Israeli talking points about a Shifa hospital somehow being the command and control center of Hamas, and the absolute need with these 3D videos that they put together for people to watch. And I, at that moment in time, kept remembering Shireen and the way that she would have laughed at the ways in which these journalists were asking these questions. She would have shook her head and said, Diana, I don't know how you deal with it. Because she knows that you don't need to have a law degree to understand that raiding and bombing hospitals is illegal. You don't need to have a law degree for that. But what would Shireen have done? And this is the part that I want to spend the last little bits talking about. I know that Shireen would not only be covering the Gaza Strip. In fact, she would probably leave that to her Gazan colleagues who've done an absolutely phenomenal job. And again, I hope that you are applauding them right now for all of the hard work that they have done for these more than 7 months of genocide that they've not only been reporting on, but have lived through. But she would have also turned her focus to what Israel is doing in the West Bank and the larger plans that Israel has in the West Bank as well as against Palestinians who live inside 48. She would have done endless stories covering Israel's destruction of virtually every single refugee camp in the West Bank, the destruction of the refugee camps so that they can somehow claim that there are no Palestinian refugees any longer. She would have done extensive coverage to cover the killing of the 527 Palestinians that Israel has killed since October the 7th in the West Bank until the end of April. She would have covered what it's like for the family members of the 115 Palestinian children that Israel has brutally killed, including the family of a little girl who was killed as she was sitting in a van, sitting in her mother's lap, going from one area to a next, killed as she was sitting in a taxi. She would have covered extensively the settler attacks, the ongoing settler attacks and the settler impunity that has been ongoing since October the 7th. She would have covered the ways in which the settlers feel emboldened to kick Palestinians out of their homes, to set those homes on fire, to create more and more pogroms in the West Bank so that Palestinians flee. She would have also covered what life is like for Palestinians inside 48. She would have covered the very popular hat that I see everywhere as a person who lives in Haifa, a hat that reads, "Make Gaza flat again." She would have covered the story of the endless signs that you see all throughout 48, everything like signs that say, "Finish them." Signs that, which is Nikki Haley's line, in case anybody didn't know, they're written in English, by the way. The signs in which the pictures of members of Hamas are morphed into the image of Adolf Hitler with a sign reading that it's time to eliminate them. She would have covered the very popular sign that says, "Together we will win," so popular that it is on billboards, it's on business cards, it's even stamped on eggs, the little eggs that people eat on a daily basis. You can see written on it, "Together we will win." She would have asked people, what does win mean to you? Does win mean the killing of more than 40,000 Palestinians? Does win mean the killing of 15,000 Palestinian children? Does win mean the destruction of each and every university in the Gaza Strip? Does win mean the bombing of 30 of 36 hospitals? Does win mean the flattening of Gaza City, the largest Palestinian city? And she probably in her report would have referred to a statistic in which 94% of Israelis would agree that that equals a win, that that is okay. She would have covered Dalal Abu Amni, the very well-known Palestinian folk singer and neuroscientist, who on the 7th of October posted on Facebook a statement that reads, "La ghalib illallah," there is no victor but God. And for that, she was imprisoned for 3 days. She would have covered that since Dalal's release from prison, that each and every day, Dalal and her family, her husband, by the way, is a physician and the deputy director of a hospital, that each and every day there have been protests outside of her house, calling for her to be expelled from her home, calling for her to be raped, calling for her to be killed, calling for her to be removed completely from the city, calling for her husband to be removed from his position in the hospital. She would have covered how the mayor of that city ran an entire election campaign on a platform of trying to get Dalal expelled. She would have covered how the Israeli authorities renamed Dalal Street the IDF Street. And she would have covered how her neighbors have turned against her and do everything on a daily basis, from cut off her water to keep loud noise going each and every night, demanding that she leave. She would have covered Nadira Kevorkian's arrest. She would have covered what it is like to be a Palestinian student, one of hundreds of Palestinian students who've been expelled from their university for simple things like liking a Facebook post, or liking an Instagram image, or posting a picture of a man sitting atop rubble with an emoji of a broken heart. She would have covered how the Israeli universities deem that as being support for Hamas. She would have covered what it's like to be living in a city like Haifa and have militias walking around all day going through your Facebook posts. She would have covered my own doxing for things like, for the very simple act of appearing on Al Jazeera and saying that bombing a hospital is illegal. She would have covered the recent closure of Al Jazeera's offices in Jerusalem. And most especially, she would have covered the killing of her colleague, Samir Abu Dakka, and her other colleague, Walid Dahdour's son, wife, 2 sons, excuse me, wife, daughter, and grandchildren. And she would have done that with the extreme compassion and love and journalistic integrity that journalists should be using and bringing to each and every story. And so I miss Shireen. I miss her dearly. I miss her reporting, and I miss her voice, and I miss her presence. And I want to conclude by thanking you once again. Excuse me. And by thanking you for continuing to do what is right, not only for South Africa, not only for Palestine, but for the world. So I thank you for your time, and I thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. And my apologies for any emotions. Thank you.
Deanna, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but people are really very moved by your presentation, and we all embrace you for what you do, for your inspiration, for bearing witness, speaking truth to power, and keep continuing. We are with you. Thank you very much. Right, we're coming to the end. We have our wonderful colleague, Professor Baso Nzenze, who's the Vice Dean of Internationalization in the Humanities Faculty. Is going to give the closure, after which we will have a very short video, 5 minutes. There'll be presents being given, and then we have some very important announcements. So please don't leave. It's about 10 more minutes. Thank you. Basil.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think you would agree with me that this has been a very special day, and that needs to be acknowledged. I say it's been a special day because it has been a day of incredibly powerful purpose. I think rightly we have been outraged and angered by a lot of what we've heard, none of which was really new to our ears, but which really resonates today because of the emphasis that has been placed. And I think it's also a special day because not only has it morally outraged us, but it has also taught us and empowered us in terms of what we can do to contribute to the cause of the Palestinian people. And so it is my singular honor to thank a number of people who have made today possible. And I'd like to begin with the family of Shireen, the late great Shireen Abu Akleh, because they have allowed us as a faculty and as a university to partake in her legacy. And for that, we thank them very much. I would like to also thank, on behalf of the university, the Minister, the Honorable Dr. Naledi Pandor, and her team at DERCOM, and also Ndate Ronnie Casrils, who I think in his own way gave an additional lecture that has taught us so much. Thank you. Our dear friend and partner, Professor Aze from Birzeit University, who's traveled many days and thousands of kilometers, and we all know the hassles of traveling when you are Palestinian. And we'd like to thank him for being here in person, and also his colleague, the Dean, Professor Samia, who have taken time out of their busy schedules and their lives to be with us today and to enlighten us. And I'd just like to point out that really, despite all the scholasticide, or perhaps because of it, Palestine remains a symbol of the power of education because, and I might need some correction here, it is one of, if not the country with the highest number of PhDs in the world. And it's therefore, it is therefore a country not only to be supported, but also one to be learned from. And I think this partnership with Birzeit University is crucial for that reason. We have a lot in terms of, to do in terms of education here in South Africa. And I think actually Palestine is not only a country to be supported, as I say, but also a country to be learned from. And that deserves recognition as well. I'd like to also recognize our speaker, Advocate Diana Bhutto, about whom I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say, and certainly for those of my generation, that she has been a great example and actually a role model for many of us on the issue of Palestine. So thank you very much, Diana. In the university, there's been a lot of effort by many very special people to ensure that this event takes place, and it is a great success. And I'd like to recognize, starting with our Executive Dean, Professor Camilla Naidu. I'd also like to thank and recognize the head of the School of Communication and Media, because I think as a school of communication, they feel a special affinity to a journalist being killed simply for doing her job, isn't it? And we'd like to thank them for keeping Shireen Akleh's name alive and well. We've also worked these past few weeks with colleagues in psychology, Dr. Sumaya Ibrahim, with Professor Shana Rasul, the head of social work and community development, Professor Salim Valley, who is in the Faculty of Education and is the chair for community, adult, and worker education, has been also our program director this afternoon. And also Naifa Nolwazi Rashid from economics, as well as our international office, represented here today, I think by Ms. Anissa Khan and Mr. Lebete Malefo, as well as our marketing guru in the Faculty of Humanities, Mr. Pegimfundo Matandela. For your efforts, colleagues, we are very grateful. I'd also like to recognize our special guest, who is special to us in the Faculty of Humanities for many reasons. He's a survivor of a genocide. And I remember he spoke on the 18th of March when we were launching his book, The Decolonization of the Palestinian Mind. He said something which has resonated with me since, because he opened by saying, "I should be dead." Isn't that such a terrible thing to be said by a scholar or by any of us in the 21st century, and for the world to watch and do nothing? He's also special to us because he is an alumnus of the University of Johannesburg. Professor Eid, we appreciate you. We've also been supported by a number of role players, including Saleh Hijaji, Professor Raji Surani, Advocate Hamdi Shakura, Marem Mantovani, as well as Scholars Against War in Palestine and Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott Against Israel. These organizations have provided a lot of useful information that is otherwise very difficult to obtain given the circumstances we are in. And for that, we are also quite grateful. And finally, to all of you here, dear colleagues, comrades, ladies and gentlemen, there are, I'm reliably told, hundreds of us in person and online. And I think that tells me that as long as the University of Johannesburg exists, there will never be scholasticide against the Palestinian people. And as the minister said, she gave us homework before she left, and for which she apologizes, by the way. She said she hopes that each of us becomes an activist in our own way. And I would just like to end by emphasizing that, you know, there are hundreds of us here. We've learned a great deal. And I think if each of us can share with just one other person who was not here what we've learned today, then I think the road to Palestine's freedom will be much shorter than it has had to be. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, that was absolutely fantastic. And we're going to show a really uplifting 5-minute video. And the featured star is, where is she? Haifa Eid. Anyway, her parents will report back. But I want you to observe the very last still picture at the end of the video, because it shows a ceremony assessing a master's thesis of a student in Gaza in a tent. That in itself shows that the resistance continues in so many different ways. I think I should perhaps say it now, that some of our colleagues will be having events coming up soon. Immediately after this, I think at 5:30, one of our stalwarts on this campus, Professor Patrick Bon, will be giving a lecture a few meters away, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Right, at the Ubuntu chambers. We also have the wonderful Professor Jill Hart and her partner David, who are here visiting. Professor Hart has always been with struggles. Even if she's not here physically, she's helped us tremendously making sense of some of the developments in our country and globally. And she'll be giving a talk on the 14th, Melanie, at Wits University. I forget the topic. It's a really interesting Empires of Progeny, Palestine. Well, I've got it wrong, but Melanie and Jill will give you the correct title. Please try and attend. We also have this weekend, and you know, there are people like my comrade Mohammed Dango, Ronnie, others around here, Roshan, Dadu, and the Palestinians who will be at the Global Anti-Apartheid Conference against, anyway, I'm going to get it wrong, settler colonialism, apartheid, genocide, etc. I know it ends with from the river to the sea. So that will be a very significant event. Then we also have, although Haidar has launched his book and there was great attendance, because of the interest, Patrick will be launching it again in the next semester, a book really that needs to be read, Decolonizing the Palestinian Mind. So without much more, please, Kevin, Brad, if we could have the video.
Students across the globe, rising up for Palestine. This is the message from 47 Soul. Keeping up is not so violent.
Never. I mean, Mexican feelings running to my veins.
It's a revolution where the youth and the students once more are on the front lines of this revolution. And everyone here, to the community, you must come tomorrow, the day after, and the day after, because the students here will remain steadfast.
What's the soul of the 47? What's the soul of the 47? What's that soul in the 47? Put the soul in the 47. No wage and no guarantee. No land on the back now. No country, no form. Back to the peasant, to the falahin born. راسمة صنع العهود وقت الحزم حنا الجنود حرب وسلم رغمان حدود حنا حلم الغياب نستقبله يا ابن العين يا ابن النهر يا ابن النبع يا ابن البحر ابن السمكو والزنقة هاي الزقة وهاي احنا بنت العين بنت النهر بنت النبع بنت البحر بنت السمكو والزنقة هاي الزقة وهاي احنا. What's the soul of the 47? What's the soul of the 47? What's that soul in the 47? Put the soul in the 47. Find the fruit on the trees. Send it off to wherever you please. Make sure that the money comes back. Come back to the peasant, to the falahin born. Fantasma ya yakıyor. Ne belli ki Palestina.
this killing machine whose victims are the people of Palestine. Share light, speak of the seas, speak of the settlers, speak of the Jack Butcher from Gangster, speak of the lies and twisted delusion, speak of the folk tales and think illusion. Make it right, make it right, make a fist stand tall and rise. The name of the Nakba, the Nakba Sabra Chatila. I will sing my Surah.
Blinding flash of white light lit up the sky over Gaza tonight. People running for cover, not knowing whether they're dead or alive. They kill them with their tanks and their planes, with ravaging fiery flames, and nothing remains, just the voices rising up in the smoky haze. We will not go down in the night without a fight.